This is called Take Your Shoes Off Moses. So, fits the theme. And there's a chorus that comes around after each verse. Take your shoes off, Moses. You're on holy ground. And I'd be honored if any of you would sing along with me. I'm the Lord thy God. God spoke to Moses at the burning bush, the burning bush, the burning bush. God spoke to Moses at the burning bush, saying, I'm the Lord thy God. Take your shoes off, Moses. You're on holy ground, holy ground, holy ground. Take your shoes off, Moses. You're on holy ground, for I'm the Lord thy God. Stand still, Moses, see salvation works, see salvation works, see salvation works. Stand still, Moses, see salvation works, for I'm the Lord thy God. Go yonder, Moses, and smite that rock down, smite that rock. Go yonder, Moses, and smite that rock, for I'm the Lord thy God. Take your shoes off, Moses, you're on holy ground, holy ground, holy ground. Take your shoes off, Moses, you're on holy ground, I'm the Lord thy God. Take your shoes off, Moses, you're on holy ground, holy ground, holy ground. Take your shoes off, Moses, you're on holy ground, I'm the Lord thy God. Take your shoes off, Moses, you're on holy ground, holy ground, holy ground. Take your shoes off, Moses, you're on holy ground, I'm the Lord thy God.
Thank you, Jay.
Sure.
And so we begin with Moses. And we're going to hear today about a burning bush. Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 15. If you'd like to follow along in your pew Bibles, because that's what I'm reading from, you'll find it on page 50 in the beginning of your texts, if you'd like to follow along. Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. And then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He said, I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain. But Moses said to God, If I come to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said further, Thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Thus you shall say to the Israelites, The Lord, the God of your ancestors, and the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my title for all generations. May this story bless you this week. You can have a seat. So what do we know so far? There was once a man called Pharaoh who became afraid that a certain ethnic population called the Israelites or the Hebrews had become too numerous in his kingdom, Egypt. The Israelites were originally from a different country, and they were basically primarily sheep herders and farmers. Now, Pharaoh enslaved the people to try and control their numbers, but they thrived in spite of the very, very harsh treatment that they endured. So Pharaoh ordered that all of the Israelites' babies be killed. And eventually that didn't work out so well, so he said, well, at least all the male babies must be killed. We know of one that survived, and his name was Moses. Infant Moses was rescued and adopted by, of all people, Pharaoh's daughter. And so we know that Pharaoh's daughter must have possessed the gifts of mercy. Moses grew up in the palace. He knew he was an Israelite. He knew what Pharaoh had done. But as he was growing up in the palace, he also learned the system. And he learned the government. One day when Moses was grown, he was out observing the kingdom, and he saw one of the Egyptian taskmasters beating one of the Israelites, and Moses snapped. And he killed that taskmaster, and he buried him in the sand. But he didn't get away with it. So he had to leave Egypt. He was forced to flee Egypt in fear of his own life. And so Moses found himself east of Egypt in a land called Midian. And he took a job as a sheep herder, married a nice girl, had a couple of kids. One day he was just out minding his own business, watching the sheep do sheepy things, when something weird happened. And that's where we've come into this story today. But I'm going to jump now, and I hope you don't get the whiplash. Stick with me. I'd like us to think about the spiritual gift inventory that Lisa Mayer handed out last Sunday. If you were fortunate enough to hear her preach last Sunday, she handed out the spiritual gifts inventory. And there's a bunch of them in the back, and there's some in fellowship hall for you to be sure and take one with you and fill it out. I've completed various forms. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but I filled this one out. And I've completed various forms of this over the years, and sometimes the results vary a little bit, depending on if there's some strong demand on me in one way or another. Pretty consistently though, and Lisa shared last week what came forward for her, pretty consistently for me are the gifts of serving and exhortation. Those are the two things that tend to come up over and over again for me. I want to know what you discover. Fill this out, let me know what you discover, because I'd love to know, because I have this sense that I know y'all, many of you anyway. But I don't. God does, I don't. Okay, so back to Moses. Stick with me here. Out of all the people that God picked, could have chosen to help represent and free this ethnic population enslaved by Pharaoh, God picked an adopted immigrant with rage issues who just really wanted to lead a nice, quiet life. God picked a man with the spiritual gifts of mercy and compassion when really someone with the spiritual gifts of administration might have been helpful, or maybe prophecy. That might have been a good choice, God. We're talking about Moses' call here, and I often talk about the call of God, and I realize that this is pastor speak when I do this. Most people don't get a voice from the clouds or a burning bush. I don't know that I've ever seen little flames hovering over a whole bunch of people's heads at Pentecost, or seen anybody struck blind on the road to Damascus, or anywhere else for that matter. Now, God probably singe your eyebrows. But God will change your life in some way. This call, and again, that's pastor speak, and it's a whisper, it's a nudge, it's a breath, it's a barely, it's a storm. This call will create a restlessness or an excitement. It'll make you wonder about certain crazy things you could do, that then you'll say, oh, that's crazy, until you think about it the next time. God's call will have you seeing a problem or something on television, or an ad for a class that you never thought you'd want to take, or a person in trouble in a different way, and then you'll wonder why you're still thinking about that problem, or that newscast, or that class, or that person several times in a day. And as Moses was tending this flock, he noticed something that didn't belong. Sun and clouds, check. Rocks and sand, check. Scrub for the sheep to eat, check. A burning bush, wait, what? Doesn't belong. He didn't smell smoke. He didn't see it falling into itself in ashy crumbs at the bottom. He didn't see an arsonist in the vicinity. And then Moses did what I think every single one of us will do. You know that Geico commercial where those teenagers go and hide in the chainsaws? That's what we do. Moses and all of us would inch our way over and take a closer look at that bush. That's how it is with God's call. It might not feel like it belongs. When everything else feels pretty normal, there's something that just isn't normal. It doesn't feel the same. And it's in that moment when out of the corner of our eye, there's a flash of possibility. And you say to yourself, I wonder if I could. Now we might feel a tiny flip in our gut and think it's just gas. Except it doesn't go away, and every time you think about it, it's there. Holy ground could be, I want to say that holy ground is holy because of the divine presence within it. And holy ground can be a computer. It can be a toolbox. It can be a sewing machine. It can be a paintbrush. It can be a tax refund. Holy ground involves being consecrated, being blessed to the Lord's service in some way that is uniquely yours. You know that flip in your gut that you think, I don't know what that is. Later you'll wonder what that is. Tomorrow you'll wonder what that is. Next week it won't go away. You can wait a year. I waited about 12. It won't go away. And later, still in that place between asleep and awake, we're going to dream of how it would be to really use our gifts of giving, or teaching, or mercy, or compassion, or exhortation, or administration. And this church is ready to welcome and use your gifts. Talk to me. We'll find a place. Because in that moment when Moses decided to approach the flames, he went from Moses, the shepherd, to Moses, the liberator. And it was then that it became holy ground. Consecrated to the Lord's service in some way. Now you all have the gifts. You are equipped. You are ready. You all have the gifts that you need to serve God. You only have to identify and acknowledge and pursue and welcome them. Because you're no different than Moses. You are no different than Moses. Because here's the thing. Here's the thing. The Bible never says that the fire went out when Moses walked away. It doesn't say that. It is still burning for all of us. Some fires simply cannot be extinguished. It continues within us, and it leads us deeper and deeper and deeper into joy, into purpose, and into discipleship. Amen.